Shawn Coultice here with Katana. Really excited for the successful Bookkeeper webinar. And we've got some amazing guests today, and DeLong and Michelle from the QuickBooks Power Hour. So really happy to have them join us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll dig into the presentation. Is that coming in okay for you, Dan and Michelle? Okay,
I see
great.
it. Yes, see it just fine.
Wonderful. Well, really excited today to speak to a topic that some accountants and bookkeepers are a little bit scared of. And so hopefully, by the end of this call today, we've created some understanding and simplified and maybe alleviated some of the fear that can be associated with inventory. So we'll dig right in here, and hopefully we can learn a little bit more about how to manage inventory in QuickBooks Online with Dan and Michelle, who are our experts today, along with myself. So I'll just maybe introduce myself first, and then we'll throw it over to Dan and Michelle to give us a bit more details on them. So hi, I'm Shawn Coultice. I'm the head of channel partnerships at Katana. I've been in manufacturing accounting for about the last 15 years. I actually worked at a manufacturer at a university, and have really always focused on the software side of things. And there definitely has been a divide between what's on the shop floor and what's in the financial system. And with Katana, our goal is to help bridge that gap and provide the tools and resources for owners and accountants to make better business decisions for their clients. I'll turn it over to you, Dan.
Hi, yeah, my name is Dan DeLong, co-hosting of the QB Power Hour with Michelle. Also doing the content duties over at schoolofbookkeeping.com, and owner of Danwit. So the whole idea of Danwit is to transform businesses through technology, and Katana is one of those ways that we can do that, right? Because having access, like you said, Shawn, having the disconnect between what's really on the shelf or on the floor and what's in the financial system and what that picture looks like, is there's definitely a disconnect there. And the more instantaneous access that you have to that, the better, right? So I'll toss it over to Michelle.
Hey everybody, I'm Michelle Long, and I am also co-host of the QB Power Hour with Dan, and I've had my own practice for about years. Very long time. I always hate to say it. It makes me, I realize though, I don't like to say I'm old, I'm experienced. But
There you go.
anyway, and I owner of Lawn for Success and a longtime trainer for Intuit since 2007. And I've worked with a lot of clients over the years working with inventory, and like Shawn said, it can be very messy and very difficult, and that's what I love about Katana is it does make it easy. It almost makes me want to jump right in there and start working with inventory again. But anyway, I'm very glad to be here. So go ahead.
Oh, well, thanks so much. Really appreciate, Michelle, your experience in joining us today, and you as well, Dan. All right, so let's talk through what are we gonna talk about today. So first, we're gonna dig into the different types of inventory tracking, some of the workflows that you can manage within QuickBooks Online, and when you might want to look at some other solutions to take QuickBooks Online maybe beyond what its capabilities currently have. And then we'll take maybe a further dive into Katana and just explain some of the inner workings of that solution and how it does integrate with QuickBooks Online. So let's dig right in. So first, we'll turn it over to types of inventory tracking, and the different types of clients that might need that inventory tracking. And Michelle, in your experience and in all the years that you have, what are some of the types of inventory tracking that you've come across, and maybe the best types of businesses that might manage their inventory with that tracking method?
Well, I think the first bullet on there is one of the most important discussions to have with the client is when do you track inventory and not track it at all? Because there are some clients that they're like, oh yeah, I want to track my inventory. But we really need to have the discussion with them about whether you should track inventory or not. Because if they're not dedicated to tracking every widget they buy and every widget they sell, they're just going to make a mess of it. Because it is complicated. If you're not willing to actually track it and record when you buy and sell it, you're going to make a mess of things. And then it's going to cost you a lot to have people like us come in and fix it and clean it up and start over sometimes. And, so it is a commitment. And the other thing where you see a lot of mistakes and messes is when they have things where they're making things, and especially when it comes to food or things like that, where there's ingredients and things, and they really can make a mess of it. And so that not tracking at all, sometimes, if you're making the world's greatest cookies or the world's greatest muffins, maybe you just don't track the inventory. You just record all your purchases and sales, and you just don't even track inventory at all. And you have to have that discussion with them until they get to where, they're a really big company, or they can afford to have somebody to, be able to really invest in a system and a person. Then we really need to get into the inventory system and discuss it. But they have to be, dedicated to tracking inventory. So you have to discuss that very first one at all. Are we going to track inventory at all? What
Yeah.
is inventory? Are we going to track it? And are we going to treat it with the respect that it deserves? Because inventory is usually a big part of their business. A lot of money is involved, and it needs respect, and they have to give it the respect that it needs. And so that very first bullet deserves discussion. Let's talk inventory. It's important.
Yeah.
It's a big part of the company usually. So anyway, I usually always have that discussion up front.
And I think that part of the biggest challenge, Michelle, and maybe you can agree, Shawn, is that a lot of times we get introduced to the client and they're in a little bit of they've got their fingers in a lot of these different workflows, and they've got like a hybrid approach to it. Like they don't know what they don't know, and they're just trying to do these things, and we've kind of illustrated it here or put it on this slide as kind of like a nothing to super advanced as far as that. But sometimes you'll get people that are picking different things in different workflows, and then just that's where the mess comes in. Would you agree, Michelle?
Absolutely. And then you get somebody that they're like, okay, we're going to track inventory. And now we're going to track everything. I had one client that, they were wanting to even track duct tape and allocate how many rolls of duct tape they were using on every single job. But then you got to start talking materiality, and if you're doing job costing, what is inventory? Just because it's something you're buying and using is not inventory. Inventory is something you're putting on an invoice or a sales receipt and selling to your customers. So that's where, I buy stuff and I sell stuff, not I buy stuff and I use it to do my job. So that's where we have to talk with the client about what is inventory. Do you buy stuff and build stuff or assemble stuff? So even discussing what is inventory versus what are materials and job materials. So you even have to discuss that with the client. But that's where Katana can even help you with tracking some of those other things. That's not necessarily inventory, but maybe some of that isn't that correct, Shawn?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at your inventory and whether you want to track it or not, is there a receiving process for it? So if the company doesn't have a receiving process where someone takes that material and they say, yep, this is how much I've received in, and that goes into your inventory, then it's probably not worth setting up and tracking your inventory if you're not willing to have that individual kind of do that receiving process. Because if that is sort of something that you're just gonna, like you're probably going to Home Depot and picking up some duct into your inventory. My family owns a large plumbing company, and they use all sorts of materials, and they were talking about tracking all the inventory on each individual truck, and there's some value to that, sure, but the amount of work it would take the plumber that drives that truck to track the inventory, I was like, guys, I don't think you're going to get there.
Right.
And I don't know how much value it's adding. Yeah, exactly. So sorry, Dan. I really like how you broke it down with the buy stuff and sell stuff and trying to just simplify it. Maybe you can shed a little light on the three categories that you kind of chat through on the bottom of the slide there.
Yeah, one of my former life, I worked at Intuit for about 18 years and talked to a lot of businesses. And I'm looking at it in the terms of like a point of sale or retail establishment when it comes to, managing their inventory needs, and kind of came up with these buckets of workflows or difficulties in inventory management, right? So like the first one is I buy the stuff and I sell the stuff, right? It's just all around stuff. Like if you've ever listened to George Carlin's thing on stuff, right? That's where it kind of came from. But I buy the stuff and I sell the stuff. I don't do anything to that stuff. I'm a reseller of goods, right? Like I have a wholesale arrangement with someone and I buy it at a discount, sell it for a profit, right? So I just take that stuff and put it on the shelf, right? So that's kind of like your reseller type of situation when it comes to the stuff. And then there's the next level, which is I buy stuff, I buy smaller quantities of stuff or smaller components, raw materials. I do something to that stuff and then I sell a different finished good, right? So that can go anywhere from, I'm bundling a gift basket of same stuff, or I am manufacturing something. I'm taking that stuff, making a bicycle, a computer, or something like that, where I've got some components and I'm putting stuff into a finished goods. And then there is, what you were mentioning, I buy that stuff. I need to know everything about my stuff before I sell or build a different finished good, right? I've got mobile inventory, I've got drop shipping, I've got things that I want to know. And to your point, Shawn, that is there's a the point of diminished returns, right? If you're going to go and invest into tracking all that stuff, there is a lot more setup in order to do. And then we've kind of seen that in this slide itself, where it's, hey, it doesn't take much to not track it at all. But if you want to go into I need to know exactly where everything is, and there may be a need for that, you're shifting the requirements that it's going to take to set that up properly. Just kind of like easiest to hardest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the goal is to try and make it as easy as possible for the customer to be compliant, right? So if you put in systems that are rather complex, you're just not going to have great compliance. And at the end of the day, the financials won't match what's going on the shop floor. So you really want to match the systems and the processes in place to the level at which a business is going to be compliant towards them, because that'll really help you at the end of the day and the end of the month, enter in the appropriate journal entries according to what's actually happening in the business. So let's talk about the types of inventory tracking and in the pros and cons maybe of not tracking at all. We've talked about it a little bit, but maybe we can just sum it up here and look at the pros and the cons around this.
Yeah, Michelle, go ahead and this is your this is where you run screaming from tracking inventory at all.
Yeah. Well, not tracking at all, of course, is when they just ignore it and they don't do any of it, of course, and so this is where they're not tracking it. So if they do have some purchases, they're just going to put that directly to cost of goods sold. So when they go out, and this is where they're saying, hey, we're not big enough to be tracking inventory. So when we buy it, we're going to put it directly to cost of goods sold. So, goes in there. And so this is where, they're just going to periodically, actually, this is kind of confusing to me as a CPA, because you kind of are still tracking it because you counted it year in. Is what I would say. You're not tracking it every item. You're not doing the perpetual system. You kind of count it once a year. You're not tracking every widget. All right. So it's easy to track because every time you buy inventory, it goes into cost of goods sold. You're not tracking each individual widget, each individual item that you buy and sell, So you just kind of have a feel for what you have, but you don't know. You just buy it when you need it. And sometimes you buy too much because you didn't see it sitting over there. So now you have too much, and so it's not good anyway. In any, anything, it's just not good.
Yeah, this is like a step above shoebox, right? Like where you're like at the end of the year, it's like, oh crap, I got to tell my accountant, so that he can do my how much I have left. So they do a count, and they're like, okay, everything else gets adjusted, right?
Or it's like me. I was cleaning out the medicine cabinet and I found 3 jars of the same thing because something gets pushed back and I think I don't have it. So I go buy more and then it gets pushed
Exactly.
back and I go, so you have too much and then some goes to waste and you wind up throwing things away, so it's inefficient, but then again, it works for smaller businesses sometimes. So,
Exactly. And I think where it's important to start to look at more of a perpetual inventory management solution rather than a periodic. And we'll define what those are in just a
yeah.
second, just so that everyone's clear on the terminology. But if a business is starting to have a hard time fulfilling orders on time, their lead times are getting lengthier, and their sales reps are always running out to the warehouse to figure out what they have in stock so they can tell the customer on the phone whether or not they can buy. If those things are starting to happen, which are affecting the scale of the business, then they really need to start to look at, maybe we should get an inventory system in place because
Right.
it's actually affecting the growth of the business. And I think that's a good way to look at it. Like, is your customer satisfaction being affected because you don't know how much inventory is in stock? And that's a great way for you to coach as a bookkeeper, you to coach your business owner and say, hey, listen, I know we've got this periodic inventory going on and we're just kind of throwing everything into cogs, but it seems like there's probably an issue. Or maybe ask the question, is there a challenge with fulfilling orders because you don't know what's out back? Because there are things that we can maybe help you out with. And that's where the advisory approach can come into play as a bookkeeper.
And that's a great point, Shawn. As that business grows, it might be okay when you start out as just me and in my garage and I can handle it. But as that business grows, they're going to have more and more of those little pain points and more waste and more inefficiency and more problems. And as that business grows, you're going to see more and more problems and you need to change it. That's a great point. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
when does a business become self-aware that there's a problem, right? Like, and I think I love what you said earlier, Shawn, about, hey, if you have a defined receiving process, or a person that does that kind of puts you in that bucket. But I think where does a business decide, okay, this is enough is enough. This is now a pain. Where would you say it's when things start to happen, like, that it's more of a theme that this is happening with waste or missed orders or things like that? Is that what you've seen in your experience, Shawn?
Yeah, absolutely. So what it typically happens is you have a business owner that has a lot of brain power. They know everything that's going on in the business and they are in full control. And they've got a few people around them that are in full control. But when the business grows to a point where the brain power isn't enough, they can't remember exactly what's out in stock. And they made a promise to a customer that they can't fulfill on. And so really, again, it comes back to that customer satisfaction. If they are lengthening out, maybe it took them a week usually to fulfill an order, and now it's taking them 2 weeks, and now it's taking them 3 weeks. So they're seeing that order fulfillment timeline get a little bit larger. That's really important to pay attention to. And then just the customer satisfaction with regards to promises that they make, and then them being able to fulfill those promises. So those two things that overall leading to customer satisfaction, if that's starting to go down because they don't know what's in stock, it's a really good time to take a look at, hey, what are we using? And when we look at the Katana customer base, usually we're helping businesses that are over 500,000 in sales. And so they've got enough volume coming in that it would be challenging for a business owner to kind of remember what they have in stock, or even maybe a few people within the business. And that's where they need to start to look at more of that perpetual inventory, understand what's going on within the business at any given time, but also can help them go to the bank so they know, hey, at this given moment, we can say exactly how much value of inventory we have in stock, and that can actually help them acquire loans and things like that when they do go to the bank and they have proof of records with regards to the value of inventory they're carrying.
That's a good point. So, like, so here in like this CPA defined, this is the glossary term of inventory tracking versus periodic versus perpetual. And we really just want to lay out the differences between the two. So periodic is when you're doing those counts every once in a while and then making those adjustments to make sure that your books are correct. And you may have that periodic be, once a year or once a quarter, once a month, or every week? I mean, Michelle, in your client experiences, have you seen a best practice for periodic inventory?
You have to do it a year in. It ruins New Year's Eve for a lot of people. I remember doing new staff, usually they don't do it until they have to, and that's usually New Year's Eve for a lot of small businesses. They got to go count that on New Year's Eve. But anyway,
I've done it.
Me too. Yes, I do remember that. I actually got stuck in the freezer of the grocery store where you couldn't write, you couldn't erase because your eraser was frozen and stuff. But anyway, periodic, you throw it all into cost of goods sold, but then at year end, you have to do a physical count and valuation of the inventory. So you don't count it all year long or anything under that periodic system. Whereas Perpetual, you are recording every single thing you buy and sell, and you still have to physically count it at year end with a Perpetual system to see how accurate you are, and then you make your adjustments. Now, with some small businesses, like say, we talked about somebody that's doing recipes or something like a restaurant, they may be doing physical counts weekly. They may be counting weekly or monthly or something, whereas others are only doing it once a year, But yeah, Dan, you did a great job of kind of talking about the difference there and stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, and the perpetual inventory, I think it does have benefits from the financial side and understanding what's going on and having that accurate inventory and cost of goods sold kind of flowing through on a sort of invoice by invoice basis. Whereas on the periodic, you're maybe not having as much visibility of the profit of any given individual order as well. So that can be a downfall when you don't have that COGS tied to the actual inventory that's going out.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is if they're combining periodic and perpetual, right? Yes. Like if they're putting everything in cost of goods sold and then wanting to track the on-hand quantities of the individual items in whatever system they are using to track it, then that's where the mess comes in, right? Clean.
And you see that quite often. You see that quite often when businesses want to keep their financial system and their operational systems separate. And that actually happens in a lot of manufacturing environments because they feel like, well, we're just going to keep our books over here and we're going to keep our inventory system over here, and they don't connect them up. And so that leads to a lot of month-end journal entries, and you still have to do all those inventory counts. So the best case scenario is you're able to marry those two systems together so that they are speaking to each other, and you do have sort of nice and tidy books as well as are able to manage your inventory. So inventory workflow requirements, I buy stuff and I sell stuff. So reseller of hard goods. So, typical companies that you might see are apparel companies. We work with a lot of companies that buy, blanks of t-shirts, and then they'll go and put, this Katana logo on the t-shirt and sell them, or whatever, fun things happening. Maybe a new Star Wars movie's coming out or something along those lines. Toys and games, we had a big Black Friday event going on. So, with Katana, we do about 33% of the transactions happen during that Black Friday sort of week and in that time frame. So we work with a lot of online resellers, and a lot of that stuff is toys, apparel, sporting goods. So things that people are buying in, maybe they do some packaging with it, or maybe convert it into something else and then they'll sell it out. We work with a lot of beauty supply companies as well. And then they often are bundling, and they have individual SKUs that they're selling those products online. But so it's a more simpler, I buy this product, I bring it into my inventory, and then I sell it off. Anything to add there, Dan and Michelle? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just think it's the easiest of the perpetual inventory trackings, is because you don't do anything to that stuff, in the process, that in between phase of I buy it and I sell it. You just need to know, right, how much you need to buy and how much you sold.
Yeah, and if you don't have any significant tracking requirements like lot traceability or things along those lines from a compliance perspective in your industry, this is where QuickBooks Online can do really well with a small business. to help them, manage that inventory and then sell it. So I think the QuickBooks Online Advanced plan has that inventory solution as a part of that. Michelle, did you have something to add there?
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. So now we're getting into a little bit more complex, right? With the manufacturers that often are, they're buying in different things, and they're maybe combining them together, or they're putting it through some sort of like CNC operation to turn it into a different finished product. So they build something and then they sell that different something. So they're taking goods in, consuming them up, making a new finished product, and then selling that off to their customer. And this can get a little bit complicated because you have now a number of variables. So you have the cost of the materials that are coming in, you have the labor costs going into the finished product. So now your cost of goods sold contains both operational labor as well as material costs. So that can go over to the financial solution so that you can really understand your profitability on an individual order. And these are some of the things you'd have, like bills of material, different units of measure, converting them. And Dan, what are some of the complexities that you see in businesses that are building things? What are some of the challenges that you come across?
Like waste, right? Like waste is a huge concern, right? I was just thinking of a pipe fitter that I was working with. He buys things in his unit. The unit of measure, the industry standard that he was working with was called a joint, which I'd never heard that as a unit of measure before. But
right.
The industry standard was 31 feet, right? But the things that he would get is sometimes he would get them at 34 feet or 29 feet, and so there was no way to, operationalize the adjustment of things happening, the different sizes that would happen. So we would have to come up with a way to, standardize as best as we could, and then make those adjustments at, periodically, so that he would have, he would know, because then what he would do is turn around and sell that scrap, right?
Yeah, right. The waste.
So it wasn't
of
waste.
Course.
So it wasn't waste. He would sell the scrap, so that became a bigger, a need to track that sort of thing. But we couldn't necessarily do it on every particular pipe. We'd have to measure each one. Okay, this one's 34 feet. I got to make sure that, then it becomes a challenge to how much effort they're putting into upfront, or is it something that we can more, standardize throughout that process?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And Michelle, in your experience in working with clients and hopefully not getting locked in the freezer, what are some of the challenges that you come across or have come across with companies that are manufacturing or building those finished goods?
Well, so one of the ones that we had struggled with was a situation where, and somebody's got one on here too. Stephanie mentioned a designer that purchases from auctions, refurbishes, and then resells. And it reminded me of a client that I had that would buy like semi trucks, or you could have a client that's buying a car or whatever, but then they're adding costs to fix it. So they were adding costs to repair or putting new tires on it and things like that. So we had a specific ID. We had to keep track of that truck and the VIN number and all that. And then we had to add additional costs to that inventory and then sell it. So, we had the purchase cost, then additional costs that were going into that inventory, and then selling it. And so that was a unique situation where we had, the specific ID and additional costs going into it. And so that was really tricky in QuickBooks, trying to figure out a way to track that. And here she's talking about that too, where, she's buying it, they're refurbishing it. So I would think they would want to track that cost going into it. So it was a little different because you're not necessarily building it or manufacturing it, but yet you're buying additional stuff to put into it. So it's kind of like that, but it was a little twist on it. So it was a little different.
Yeah, and there's so many different use cases, right? It could be a business that is, making a beverage, or it could be a business that, like you said, and I've worked with these companies that would buy in like a stock truck, pickup truck, and then they would add all these things onto it to make it off-road capable, right? So now it's like a different finished product. They want to track the labor time, the the components that go into it, just so they understand what that finished product is. Or on the beverage side, they want to have some lot traceability aspects to it. And I think that's where we get into sort of this next slide, where you have what we were talking about previously, where it's like maybe a standard bill of material. They're taking some products and making a finished good, and maybe there's some unit of measure conversion. But as you go further down that complexity chain, you start to get into businesses that have multiple locations. They need to track where things are in the inventory, so bin locations, and maybe they want to barcode scan the items when they're picked from stock. There's lot traceability. So these types of things start to come about as you get into larger businesses over that $1 million mark, usually, that are maybe manufacturing and starting to have some more complexities, requirements within their business. And this is where usually they're going to have to start to look beyond QuickBooks Online. Even in the manufacturing piece, I would say probably the bills of material aspect is going to be a bit of a challenge, but certainly when you get into these more advanced requirements, I don't think QuickBooks Online would be the best solution to manage that inventory portion. They're probably going to need to look at some sort of add-on. What's your experience there, Dan and Michelle?
Yeah, definitely when you get into these workflows and components, you only have to watch like 1 or 2 episodes of Shark Tank to know that they always throw out their landed cost, when it comes to when they come to their pitch to the sharks, right? So once you have that entering into your glossary or your terminology in your business, then you're in this this phase of things for sure.
Okay, well, that's a great way to look at it. So if they have landed costs, you're starting to get a little bit more complex. And if you want to start having that roll into, your cost of the item itself, so you have that accurate cost of goods sold, you're probably going to need to start to go beyond QuickBooks Online. Awesome. So tracking inventory in QuickBooks Online. Michelle.
One of the things, though, I just wanted to say about Katana, though, is you talk about all these big companies all the time. But one of the things that I love about Katana is it's so affordable that the small companies can use it too. I mean, it's so affordable that the little guy can use it as well. So it's so powerful and wonderful that, yes, these $1 million companies can use it. But I mean, your pricing is so great that the small guys can use it as well. So that's one of the best things, I think. So sorry, I just
that's a great point.
I don't want people to think it's only for $1 million complex companies. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, it's a great point, Michelle. Katana started 6 years ago. The majority of our customers are actually under 1 million in annual revenue, right? Like maybe it's around like 45% of them are in that under 1 million in annual revenue. And they just needed a little bit of an extra tool to connect to their maybe e-commerce store, pull in that sales demand, help them manage their inventory, which you couldn't quite do within QuickBooks Online. And so they can get up and running on the product for $100 a month as an additional. So like you said, Michelle, I totally agree with that. It doesn't have to be these massive complex businesses that need support managing their inventory.
Well, I mean, I think there's a trend right now, with the Etsy sellers of the world, right, where they have a lot of these complexities, but they don't have a warehouse like we showed in that picture, right? It's like a hybrid of the solopreneur, but they have some pretty complex needs when they're creating handcrafted goods and selling them individually, these customizable tumblers or whatever it is that they're making. But that's the kind of the trend that I'm seeing is that kind of individual that needs a little bit more of to manage their inventory. Otherwise, they're like that person with their hands up in the air, like, I don't know, I've got all these raw materials that I don't know what I've spent on, and now I've got to account for them in some way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's I think the advent of technology that allows small businesses to go to market really effectively today, right? It might be an Instagram ad that you put out there and you've got a Shopify store or an Etsy store, and all of a sudden you've got 100 orders in and you're like, whoa, well, that worked. And so anyone can do it now, right? Anyone can start their own small business out of their house and start to gain traction as an individual brand. And that's really where Katana started out. We, through COVID-19, a lot of businesses were started from these small household companies, and that was the majority of customers. And we grew 3 times through COVID, through the COVID time period, because people were buying things online, and people figured out, well, there's a need or demand there where people are looking to buy product online, and so a lot of small businesses, came about looking for something to help them manage their inventory, and that's where they found Katana.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about
QuickBooks.
the online, the best solution as far as what QuickBooks can do. So in tracking inventory in QuickBooks Online, you got to be in the Plus or Advanced. There's no difference in the functionality between Plus and Advanced when it comes to inventory. Just set that straight there. But the cost basis is always going to be FIFO, so first in, first out. So there is no average costing or anything like that. So it's something to keep in mind that if you are going to be tracking inventory inside of QuickBooks Online, it's going to be doing that on a first in, first out basis. But it's very basic in that there's no assemblies, there's no multiple units of measure. There is a SKU, so you can track the stock keeping unit and reorder points. But it's really ideal for the reseller model of I buy stuff and I sell stuff, and you want to track perpetually the inventory levels in and out, right?
That makes perfect sense. So there certainly is inventory capabilities within QuickBooks Online. It's not a solution that you immediately, your client has inventory, they can't use QuickBooks Online. I don't think that that's the case, though. Sometimes you hear that kind of in the market a little bit. I think it certainly has some functionality, but it just doesn't quite have the robust aspect like maybe QuickBooks Desktop did, right? Where QuickBooks Desktop did have some of that robust functionality, but was limited maybe in some other ways. And that's where a solution like Katana can help fill some of those gaps. So when you look at Katana, what it does is it helps extend out and keep your client on that Intuit product, right? On QuickBooks Online. So they don't have to go to some sort of ERP or NetSuite that's, quite complex and a full new financial solution. They can stay on QuickBooks Online, but they can extend out that functionality by using something like Katana, where we do have the advanced inventory functionality. We have sales orders. You can do partial invoicing. We can connect with multiple sales channels like Etsy and Amazon and, Shopify. We have production planning and scheduling built into the system. And these are things that you just wouldn't have in something like QuickBooks Online, but you can very easily connect up. It takes me, under 5 minutes to connect Katana to QuickBooks Online. So you can set up that integration really quickly, hook it up to a couple different sales stores, and you really have a nice tech stack to help your client manage their inventory more effectively.
Yeah, I always think that QuickBooks is like the shallow end of the pool, right? Like you would not want to go off the 10-meter high dive into the shallow end of the pool, right? So you'd want to make sure that you have enough water, to safely dive in if you need that degree of difficulty, right, of doing that sort of thing. Otherwise, there's going to be some emergency room visits when it comes to that.
Yeah, so always wear your life jacket, I think, if you're starting to get into the deep end. And that's actually a great point, Dan. Interestingly, through the analogy, when I say always wear a life jacket, one of the things we hear from a lot of accountant firms is that they're challenged with helping businesses from a inventory perspective because they don't have the support to help them, right? So they know like an inventory system would be great. Like I'm pretty sure this Katana thing is good, but I'm probably not going to recommend it because I don't know if I can really help them with it. And what if it doesn't work, right? And so that's where I think it's really important to highlight you're not alone. There are great
Right.
resources out there to help you as a bookkeeper, and Katana has us and our own support staff that can help you and your client just evaluate Katana. Is it a good fit? Does it make sense to the owner
Right.
who's your client to look at it? And then if you want even more help, we have partners that can help out, and look at that inventory solution for you. But sorry, on the desktop and some of the cool things that they
Well,
can do.
so what you're saying is you have a lifeguard on duty.
We have a lifeguard on duty.
There we
Exactly.
go. Just tying it all together to the analogy there. But desktop, right? Desktop has been around for 34 years, I think. And in 2002, Enterprise came out, and they started to incorporate some of the more advanced inventory functions inside of the Enterprise product, right? So now you have this idea of the whole available quantity as opposed to just what's on hand, so that you don't sell out from underneath a customer that's promised, or whether it's being built. You have negative quantity warnings, building raw material and labor. And then enhanced inventory receiving, where you can separate the receiving actions to the billing of said receiving actions, so that it doesn't necessarily, so changes that happen from the billing to the receiving piece can be separate events, and then especially when they happen in different accounting periods, that could be a challenge if you don't have that. And then auto cost and pricing, where you can change your price when costs change. So some of these functionalities are pre-built into Enterprise, but there's a but to that, right? It's a desktop product, so you have the installation, the setup, the user licenses, and the half hour of trying to figure out who's still in the program so I can go into single user mode and resort my lists or whatever it is. So those are the gum in the shoe, as we like to call it, when it comes to the robust technology that occurs in desktop and in there, but the infrastructure that is not able to be as flexible. There we go. That's the word I was looking for, as an online cloud management system.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We work with some of the larger firms, and they were looking at all the different inventory solutions. And it's no secret, like the larger firms are trying to figure out a way to transition their clients that are managing inventory from desktop or enterprise to QuickBooks Online. And the reason that they're doing that is one of their main objectives is to increase the outsource service offerings that they provide. So whether that be bookkeeping services, it might be fractional accounting services, whatever the case may be, they can do a better job for their clients by having more access to their system. And in an online product, that's what they get with QuickBooks Online. And so there is this sort of push to move to QuickBooks Online to increase that accessibility to their clients so they can provide more services and support. And their clients don't need to maybe hire on a full-time employee for something like that. They can outsource that to their bookkeeper or their accounting professional. So it's certainly something the smaller firms are starting to see and take advantage of as well, with some of the functionality that is available within QuickBooks Online, but not within QuickBooks Desktop. Michelle, what are your thoughts on that?
It makes a lot of sense to me. Plus, it's an area where these clients really need our help, and it's an area for our advisory services to help advise them on, the cash flow and on helping to, mark down that inventory and get it moving. Because if you sell that inventory, you get it converted to cash. So it's an area where we can help the client with some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so is your pricing right? Are your margins right? Are your inventory turnovers right? All kinds of opportunities in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was brought up in QuickBooks Connect. We were there last week as how historically in businesses, they described it at QuickBooks Connect as the bookkeeper was in the back office. Like they were kind of, just getting the number, making sure the numbers were right and putting those forward. But what's happening is that bookkeeper and that accountant is moving towards that front office, working directly with the owner and providing that advisory service, because they're the ones that really understand the lifeblood of the business, which is the finance. And that's really what's important to understand. And so if you can improve the services that you're able to offer through technology, it's a great way to take advantage of that opportunity. And sorry, Dan, what were you had something to
No,
say?
I've been seeing this recurring video on social media, and it's the rise and fall of Blockbuster, right? So,
Oh,
Blockbuster had an opportunity to buy Netflix at one point, and they said no, right? And that just kind of speaks to, and they were the entertainment conglomerate of the late 90s, early 2000s, right?
Absolutely.
It's those, and I'm just drawing a lot of parallels with the Blockbuster story to, where we are today in the accounting industry. Not to say that, people are blockheads, but the people that are adopting the technology and evolving, are the ones that are going to be, the Netflixes and the Hulus, and be on the other side of things, rather than holding on to, the way things are, uh, and not adjusting.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. I mean, there's a change happening, right? It's been happening for a little while now, but older, more traditional industries take a longer time to adopt to that change. But certainly, learning how to adopt to QuickBooks Online and utilize the ecosystem that surrounds it will allow you to increase the service offering, better service your client, and allow their business to scale at a much more affordable price.
And I heard a quote, and I'm going to throw this out there. Um, it's Yeah, and I got it up over on the other screen because I want to say it right. In dysfunctional relationships, familiar suffering is a lot less scary than change, even if that change is for the better, right? And you see that with abusive relationships and addiction and all of those things. And I'm sorry if I went down a rabbit hole, but it seems like, that's where we're at in the state of accounting and bookkeeping, is that there are some people who are just holding on to that dysfunction, and not willing to make the change when it comes to that, because it's less scary, right? Like, I know the devil, I'll stay with the devil I know, right? At least I know
Absolutely.
what I'm getting, and it change is a lot more scary to them.
I totally agree with you. I mean, any sort of change in life is scary, right? But there certainly is a significant opportunity right now that I don't think will happen again in the accounting world for some time, where you have this huge shift. There's 2.5 million customers on QuickBooks Desktop today. The majority of them have inventory. The reason that they are still on QuickBooks Desktop today is because they have inventory, right? The other 2.5 million have already switched over to QuickBooks Online. So there's this huge amount of customers that are on QuickBooks. Now, there's a couple options for those customers on QuickBooks Desktop. They can move to QuickBooks Online, but they have to find an inventory solution likely that can support QuickBooks Online, or they go to a different solution. And so for the bookkeepers that work primarily in the Intuit space, it's important for them to understand what are those inventory solutions in the market? How can you provide a soft landing for that client? And even paint the picture of this is actually a beneficial transition because we can provide even better services for your business and give you a more holistic overview of what's actually going on in real time. And that goes back to that perpetual conversation. So it's a great opportunity. And this kind of dovetails into what is Katana. It's part of that QuickBooks Online ecosystem. We're the number one ranked manufacturing solution in the QuickBooks space. And really, we focus on businesses that are typically brands selling online. They maybe bring in some material, they convert it into a different finished product, or they might buy and sell it. And for the most part, there's a common tech stack that we integrate with. So often our customers will have QuickBooks Online or Xero and Shopify. So that sort of is the trifecta where we have a lot of success, and we have about 1,700 customers today utilizing Katana. So, you know, we've been around for a few years, and we're about doubling in size every year. So there's certainly demand for the product. And why is there demand? Because there are struggles with businesses that manage inventory, and there's quite a few things here. But one of the biggest challenge for a lot of these businesses is that real-time inventory. It's really difficult when you're selling online and you have sales orders coming in throughout the day to actually show to the business owner what they have available in stock. So if you think about a sales orders coming in from Shopify, at what point do you create demand for that finished product or even the raw material? If that doesn't happen in real time, the inventory you're showing available in other solutions that you might integrate with or sell on is going to be inaccurate. And so that leaves you open to overselling or not having enough inventory in stock to fulfill those orders. So that real-time nature of Katana really helps solve that challenge. But Dan and Michelle, when you think of the inventory struggles, you know, is there anything that jumps out of the screen here? We've got 8 things listed out that you know you see businesses often struggle with when it comes to inventory.
Yeah, just knowing where their stuff is at any given time, right? Like, and especially with, like, you know, being in an omni-channel space where maybe they have a brick and mortar and they have an e-commerce on top of that, selling out from underneath their own customers, I think is probably one of the biggest challenges that they could experience, which then leads to those other, you know, problems of, okay, there's now a delay in fulfilling orders. There's a back order. I've got to communicate that with my customer. You know, all of those things that now it's a customer service issue as opposed to just, you know, selling and taking money.
Yeah, and it goes back to that customer satisfaction that we were talking about earlier, right? And trying to, you know, make sure that your customers are being satisfied. Sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
Well, since Dan mentioned that, I was going to mention then the rising costs and setting your prices to make sure you've got the margin to cover all your other costs and overhead. Because the cost of everything is going up so much lately and so rapidly. That's critical to make sure that you set your prices accordingly.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. Understanding and having accurate costs of goods sold, right? So in that periodic methodology we were talking about, you have no visibility between the relationship in any individual order of what the cost of goods sold is and what you sold it for and how much money you made. And so bringing in a solution that gives you that visibility, it can help you tighten your price point or you know, increase it just to ensure that you're always profitable.
Well, until you do that 1 day count and you're stuck in the freezer with a frozen eraser, that's the day that you know all of that information. But as soon as that day goes away and then sales start to happen, and you're not tracking those things, you have less visibility into that until it goes back. So it's like this ebb and flow of, I know this information, what can I do with that? And then it's too late.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, you think of all the things that are going on with AI, and knowledge is power, right? The more information you have, not only the more information, the more accurate the information is that you have, the better business decisions you can make. And that's really where I highlight the real-time nature of Katana. We're pulling in that demand. We're creating a really seamless process to generate your purchase orders based on that demand, ensuring that you're able to fulfill orders. And then we have things like forecasting coming out. So in that Black Friday deal, you can say, well, we're expecting a spike in sales. So how much not only finished goods do I need to keep in stock, but also flow into how much raw materials do I need to buy to ensure I'm not going to run out based on the expected influx of orders. So you can really do a lot more effective inventory management, ensuring that you're buying things at a good price point ahead of schedule rather than rush ordering things and having to pay extra shipping fees and chipping away at that tight margin that's already there. Right, because that's what ends up happening. And so I did implementations for years of a couple different systems, and there was two common things that I would always see in the inventory. It was either they had a lot of product of things that they didn't sell, and the things that they were moving really quickly, they never had enough of.
Yeah.
So it was just so common where they, you know, they needed a system to help them say, hey, you need to buy more of this. It seems so obvious, but you need to buy this quantity based on your demand, and this stuff you know you don't need to buy nearly as much of, and that'll really help you out with your cash flow situation as well.
And I like what you guys have in built in. It's very color coded, right? Like it's very dashboardy. You know, like when you see a check engine light go on, you know there's a warning that needs to happen. But if you've got green, yellow, red, right, like that is, you've got your traffic lights as far as that. And I love the way that you can, in real time, move things around so that you can plan accordingly.
Absolutely, yeah. Katana's got this really easy drag and drop feature, and it gives you, like you said, the stoplights idea, right? Green means go, we're ready, let's go ship out the order. Yellow, okay, we've got some things in place, but it's not ready yet. Red, we don't have anything in place, we better get on top of this. And right with one click, you can see what you need to do and go get that purchase order or manufacturing order created. So it really does make that whole thing quite simple. And the nice thing about it is we're wrapping that all up into QuickBooks Online. So when you buy something in Katana, it's going to go in and update your inventory. So it's going to increase your inventory based on that value. And that can include also your landed costs. So we can throw in landed costs there. And then when you go and make something, we can actually add that operational cost that it took you to manufacture that product to your inventory, to that finished good inventory, because now your cost of goods sold, when you go and sell that product, is going to deduct from that inventory level. So we're having this really tight connection between Katana and the value of inventory that you're holding in QuickBooks, and a really accurate cost of goods sold. So now your financial solution is in QuickBooks Online is carrying the an accurate value in inventory as well as cost of goods sold perpetually. So thank you so much for your time, Dan.
We timed that right.
Thank you. We did. You can tell we have some accounting backgrounds. We're very prompt. So I definitely invite anyone here to reach out to Dan and Michelle. They've got some really great programs in the QuickBooks Power Hour, and some really awesome experience in being in the space for a long period of time. If you do have inventory clients that are interested in maybe improving their business or getting a better handle on their inventory, feel free to reach out to Katana. Would love to have a conversation with you and understand a bit more about your practice and maybe your inventory clients, and see if we can help. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having us.